Admiral, why is Remembrance Sunday still important?
So I think it's incredibly important on a number of levels. So the first one is the way that the nation comes together to pay our respects for our predecessors and what they achieved on our behalf. And I think the scale of that reflection, the fact that it's not just in London, it's in every town, every city across all the nations of the United Kingdom. And then that's also reflected across the world, and particularly for the military. Every unit will have their moment of reflection. And that's literally over 10,000 people deployed across the world in over 50 countries and at sea around the world on over 50 operations. And for us, I think it's also an element of responsibility. The responsibility that we maintain the freedoms that these amazing people achieved on our behalf and with their sacrifice. And that's what we do every day on behalf of the nation.
Let's talk about continuing to protect those freedoms, those values. We probably have fewer men and women under arms at any time, probably for a century, I guess. How concerned are you about our ability to muster and project force in the size and the quality that the nation might need?
So I think when we look at it, the quality of our men and women is outstanding, and the commitment and their level of service, again, is extraordinary. So that we should take a lot of comfort from that. Then if you look at us as a nation, we're a P5 nation, we're the strongest European partner of NATO, we're a nuclear power. And what that means is that every day the Prime Minister has a nuclear deterrent at sea that he knows is ready to respond in the worst circumstances. But the Prime Minister also knows that we're part of the world's strongest ever military alliance called NATO. And NATO's got even stronger, growing from 30 nations to 32 nations. And then when you look at the UK's role, well, we're a strong partner alongside our allies. So we're strong with our army, so we're deployed in Estonia, we're deployed on NATO's eastern flank, we're looking to be even stronger in the future. We're strong with our Air Force that conducts air policing, again, on behalf of other countries in NATO to make sure the whole alliance stays safe. And our Navy ensures that we have what we call freedom of manoeuvre in the North Atlantic. Now, when we project some of the threats that we're facing, we're also saying we need to be even stronger in the future. And that's the piece. So we're strong now, but can we be even stronger in the future?
I want to talk to you about the alliance, but just for the moment, let's talk about our part in that alliance and whether we can actually play our part. Secretary of State for Defence said recently that he thought we aren't necessarily ready to fight a war at scale. Can you say confidently that Britain could fight a war at scale, that we could play our part as advertised and as our partners expect?
Absolutely. So our servicemen and women will always be ready to serve their nation and to do as the government of the day directs us to do.
If they have the capabilities.
And we do have the capabilities. And then the reassurance is that we do that alongside our allies. And for those biggest fights, then we will always do them with our allies. But we're also being honest in saying we need to be even stronger in the future. So some of that is about having deeper stockpiles. Some of that is being better at bringing technology in, learning the lessons from Ukraine so that we can continue to have an advantage over our potential enemies. And some of that is also recognizing that you need to have a defense industry that can better support those demands. We're in a more dangerous world. This government has been really clear about that. The previous government was really clear about that. That means we need to strengthen our armed forces.
Well, you have actually been pretty optimistic about the prospects of victory in Ukraine, but Post the American elections, how confident are you that America will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine? Because unless they do stick to what has been done thus far, exactly all you've been saying about the power of the alliance actually disappears, doesn't it?
It would be wrong for me to speculate less than a week after the results of a US election about US policy and how that might change in the future. But if I talk about where we are at present, what you're seeing is a Russia that is making tactical gains and is seizing more territory, but it's doing that at enormous cost. Enormous cost in terms of its soldiers, and over 1,500 people a day either killed or wounded in October. Enormous cost in terms of its economy, having to reshape its economy, so 40% of its public spending is now on defence and security. And at the strategic level, Russia is losing. Russia wanted a smaller NATO, it's got a larger NATO. Russia wanted to subjugate Ukraine, it's never going to subjugate Ukraine. And that's what we should be really clear about, that we continue our support for President Zelensky and his people in their existential fight, and they're the ones that are seeking our continued support.
But in the end, it will carry on the fight. And what Zelensky himself says is that actually we're supplying him and supporting him to the extent that he doesn't lose, but not to the extent that he can ever see the prospect of victory. In the end, as Mr. Trump seems to be implying, there's going to have to be a deal, isn't there?
So I think we've always been clear that when we talk about this coming to an end, that's for the government of Ukraine to determine. And in the meantime, we continue to support Ukraine. And that support from the UK, from the international community, has got even stronger.
But let's talk about Chancellor. She talked about getting to 2.5% of GDP on defence. We are nowhere near that. I think it would take another 15 to 20 billion pounds. Are we and our partners in Europe spending as much as we should, or is Mr. Trump right that we are, to some extent, free riding on the United States?
So we're very close to 2.5% because we're just over 2.3% at the moment. The government has laid it as part of its manifesto that it will grow to 2.5%. There will be a debate as to when that materialises. And part of that debate is a strategic defence review that's ongoing at the moment.
It's going to report next spring.
That report's early in the new year. That's the point at which we take stock of these threats that we face. We look at our armed forces and what they currently constitute. How do we best organise those for the future? What equipment do we need for the future? And that's the process to take stock of these big movements. And is that about a Europe spending more on defence? Is that about responding to some much more challenging threats? And how do you do that as a whole?
Let me just turn, if I may, lastly to, if you like, morale and conduct within the armed forces. When you were head of the Navy, you put a high priority on tackling bullying. I read in some remarks that you made that you thought that the level of diversity in some aspects, some parts of our armed forces were, I think you used the word ridiculous. There's a central issue here. Are we actually getting to grips with the bullying and the misogyny in our armed forces?
We're absolutely getting to grips with it. And one reflection of that is that as we get to grips with it, there will be the ugly stories about some of the things that have gone on in the past. And that's really difficult for all of us, difficult as senior leaders, but we're clear that we will support the people who in the past may have felt that they didn't have the confidence to make some of those complaints and those grievances, and now we're getting after it in a way that is much stronger than ever before. But we've also got to reflect that we are an organisation that looks to represent the whole of our society. Everybody that wants to serve in their armed forces should have the same opportunity, and it should be attractive for everybody across our nation. And if there are some barriers there where it's less attractive for some groups of people, then we're determined to overcome those. And then what we're saying, when you come into the armed forces, that whoever you are, whatever your background, you can give the best of yourself every day, because you're doing this magnificent thing where you're putting on uniform and you're serving your country. And that's what we want to cohere around, and we want to ensure that that is the same experience for every individual in our armed forces.
Sir Tony Radakin, thank you very much.
Thank you.